All right, the Wright Brothers, Lesson 7. We're going to read Chapter 5, Back to the Drawing Board, starting with page 51. And we're going to read to page 64, but we're not reading the entire thing. So we're going to start halfway through the chapter on page 51. So remember, as I read today, that we are pretending to be one of the Wright brothers. So think about what we will write about in our journal after our final glider test. Okay, so we're going to start right here. So, by the middle of September, they had assembled their new glider and were ready to try it out. This year, they took turns in the pilot's position, giving Orville a chance to fly for the first time. To begin with, they were very cautious. They would launch the machine from the slope on Big Hill and glide only a short distance as they practiced working the controls. Steering to the right or left was accomplished by warping the wings, with the glider always turning toward the lower wing. Up and down movements were controlled by the forward elevator. In a few days, they made dozens of short but successful test glides. At this point, things looked more promising than ever. The only mishap occurred one afternoon when Orville was at the controls. That evening, he recorded the incident in his diary. So, why were they cautious with a new glider? So he said, I was sailing along smoothly, without any trouble, when I noticed that one wing was getting a little too high and that the machine was slowly sliding off in the opposite direction. The next thing I knew was the wing was very high in the air, a great deal higher than before, and I thought I must have worked the twisting apparatus the wrong way. Thinking of nothing else, I threw the wingtips to their greatest angle. By this time, I found suddenly that I was making a decent descent backwards towards the low wing from the height of 25 or 30 feet. The result was a heap of flying machine, cloth and sticks in a heap with me in the center without a bruise or scratch. The experiments thereupon suddenly came to a close till repairs can be made. In spite of this sad catastrophe, we are tonight in a hilarious mood as a result of the encouraging performance of the machine. Flying in 1902 glider as a kite. So I'm going to make a prediction here since the glider crashed. Maybe they'll give up, maybe not. We'll have to read and find out and see if my prediction is right. So a few days later, I made the glider as good as new. So I guess not. It wasn't seriously damaged again during hundreds of test glides, and it repeatedly withstood rough landings at full speed. Wilbur and Orville became more and more confident. Our new machine is a very great improvement over anything we had built before and over anything anyone has built. Wilbur told his father, everything is so much more satisfactory that we now believe the flying problem is really nearing a solution. And yet, the solution was not quite at hand. As they continued their test flights, a baffling new problem arose. On most flights, the glider performed almost perfectly, but every so often, in about one flight out of 50, it would spin out of control as the pilot tried to level off after a turn. So even though the spinning out of control is only happening about 1 in every 50 flights, why is it important for them to solve this problem? Talk to your partner. We were at a loss to know what the cause might be, wrote Wilbur. The new machine. It had a vertical tail while the earlier ones were tailless. and the wingtips were on a line with the center while the old machines had tips drawn out like a gull's wings. The trouble might be due to either of these differences. First, they altered the wingtips and went back to Big Hill for more test flights. Again, the glider spun out of control during a turn. Then they focused their attention on the machine's 6-foot high double van tail, which was fixed rigidly in place. They had installed this tail to help stabilize the glider during turns, but now it seems something was wrong. Why does Orville think making the tail movable will solve this problem? Think about that. So, lying in bed one sleepless night, Orville figured out what the problem was. The tail worked perfectly well most of the time. During some turns, however, when the airspeed was low and the pilot failed to level off soon enough, pressure was built up on the tail, throwing the glider off balance and into a spin. That's just what happened to Orville the day of his accident. The curve was to make the tail movable, like a ship's rudder or a bird's tail. The next morning, at breakfast, Orville told Wilbur about his idea. So after thinking it over a few minutes, Wilbur agreed. So again, that question is, why does he think making the tail movable will solve the problem? Then he offered an idea. On his own. Why not connect the new movable tail to the wing warping wires? This would allow the pilot to twist the wings and turn the tail at the same time, simply by shifting his hips. With the wings and tail coordinated, the glider would always make a smooth banked turn. They removed the original tail and installed a movable single van tail 5 feet high. From then on, there were no more problems. The movable tail rudder finally gave the Wright brothers complete control over their glider. With this improvement, our serious troubles ended, wrote Wilbur, and thereafter we devoted ourselves to the work of gaining skill by continued practice. So, what does Wilbur mean when he says we devoted ourselves to the work of gaining skill by continued practice? Talk to your partner. Alright, we're going to skip to page 64 now. Says, with their movable tail rudder, the Wrights felt confident that their glider could master the winds. They practiced flying at every opportunity, staying on their camp until late in October, long after their visitors had left. Glides were made whenever weather conditions were favorable. Wilbur recalled, many days were lost on account of rain. Still more were lost on account of light winds. Whenever the breeze fell below 6 miles an hour, very hard running was required to get the machine started, and the task of carrying it back up the hill was real labor. But when the wind rose to 20 miles an hour, gliding was a real sport, for starting was easy, and the labor of carrying the machine back uphill was performed by the wind. So, why was the wind so important? One day, they had a wind of about 30 miles an hour and were able to glide in it without any trouble. That was the highest wind a gliding machine was ever in, so that we now hold all the records, Orville wrote home. The largest machine ever handled, the longest distance glide, American, the longest time in the air, the smallest angle of descent, and the highest wind. Well, I'll leave the rest of the blow till we get home. So how do the brothers know that they hold all of these records? So, that season, the Wrights had designed, built, and flown the world's first fully controllable aircraft. The three-dimensional system of aircraft controlled out by the brothers is the basic system used even today in all winged vehicles that depend on the atmosphere for support. So, wait. It kind of seems hard to believe that the system the brothers figured out in 1902 is the same system that airplanes use today. Maybe I need to read to see if my understanding is correct. So, except for an engine, their 1902 glider flew just as a Boeing 747 airliner or jet fighter flies. A modern plane warps its wings in order to turn or level off by moving the ailerons on the rear edges of the wings. So we can take a look at this picture on page 67 here. That's what we're talking about. It makes smooth banking turns with the aid of a movable vertical rudder, and it noses up or down by means of an elevator, usually located at the rear of the plane. Wilbur and Orville made hundreds of perfectly controlled glides in 1902. They proved that their laboratory tests were accurate. The next step was to build a powered airplane. Before leaving camp, Orville wrote, "We were already at work on the general design of a new machine, which we propose to propel with a motor." So tomorrow we will find out about their next invention. So let's take a look at those pictures now. Starting on page 55 back here. So you can see that image here. So it's a close-up of the modified 1902 glider in free flight. When the wind rose to 20 miles an hour, gliding was a real sport. This one, caption at the bottom says, "Wilbur making a right turn in the 1902 glider."